Hello.
Taylor Rockwell, hello.
Hello, Daryl Grove.
So you're in your car, right? You're on the way?
I'm in my car. I'm on the way.
Okay, so before we talk about the Sunil Gulati press conference, it's worth noting, this just occurred to me, you are on your way to coach the future of America.
I mean, I don't know if you want to put that kind of pressure on 4-year-olds, but yeah, sure, why.
But I
I'm going to go tell them that before the lesson starts.
No pressure, but 2022 World Cup
We
is
didn't,
coming.
yeah, we didn't qualify for the World Cup. You guys are 4. Get it together.
But I just thought people might like to know that a man of the quality of Taylor Rockwell is out there coaching the youth of America.
And that's why we didn't qualify for the 2026 World Cup, the one we're going to be hosting.
All right, so this is kind of an impromptu Total Soccer show.
Yeah.
I don't want to call it an emergency pod, but we were just on the teleconference with Sunil Gulati. We didn't ask a question. We were silent participants because it was kind of a lot of people on the call. And I guess it's worth just maybe us talking about what was said on that call and getting the word out about sort of, because we're getting some picture of the direction of US soccer from this phone call, right? So
we are, and with that in mind, my wife and I have a term which maybe other people use, but like, you know, when your partner like audibly sighs, and there's that difference between like just sighing and that sigh that means something is wrong.
Yeah.
We call that an exaspa sigh, and I'm going to say that this was an exaspa sigh podcast.
You guys are the cutest.
That's what this is, though, right? Like that's what that press conference was an exaspa sigh of like,
yeah.
I think all right.
I think maybe you're more surprised than me, but okay, tell me why you're exasperating.
Well, no, I mean, this is, first of all, I didn't even think Bruce Arena was going to resign. I thought it was going to be announced that he had been let go of his duties. But no, I always thought Sunil Gulati was going to stick around. But I think that was maybe born of like recent history where it just seems like that's the way things tend to go. I was kind of hopeful that he would say like, yes, you know, this isn't the direction we wanted to be going, so I'm not going to stand for re-election. He didn't say he wasn't standing for re-election, but he also just kind of dodged that one. It seems very much like he is going to be running again.
Okay, so some people, because we're going to get this podcast out pretty soon after the conference. The news might not have spread just yet, but here's exactly what's happened. Bruce Arena resigned this morning, right? Not a surprise. Didn't qualify for the World Cup. His contract was through the end of the World Cup. The end of the World Cup is here for the United States. It happened Tuesday night, okay? Sunil Gulati has said that he has no plans to resign immediately, and he didn't rule out running for US soccer president in February. If you heard our previous couple of shows, the election is February. It seemed from the press conference that Sunil Gulati plans to stand for re-election. I think that was, he never specifically said that. He said he'll take some time. He said it's not the right day to announce my personal plans, but he also sort of talked about the voters deciding, the voters being the National Council. Yeah. The only way the voters decide is if you stand for election. Fair?
I remember, I apologize for not being able to remember exactly who asked the follow-up question, but initially it was sort of like, you know, no, I don't think there needs to be a mandate. It's up to the voters. And somebody was like, well, you seem like you tipped your hand there by saying it's up to the voters. And he's like, well, no, I was just talking generally. That's what the question was or something like that. Right. I'm pretty sure it was not. So
it does look like Sunil Gulati, at least right now, is planning to stand for re-election in February. Yeah. I wonder if today's call was a surprise to him, because I don't really want to name any names, because I feel like the teleconference, it's not secret, obviously it's an open press conference, but I don't want to sort of ascribe emotions to various journalists when we don't necessarily know what their motivation was. But there was definitely an air of frustration in the room, and a lot of people getting across the message that kind of the public are no longer in favour of a Sunil Gulati regime. And there were a few questions, like, it was basically the question of, hey, the public doesn't want you anymore, why are you running again? Rephrased various times. I'm not sure. I think Sunil Gulati essentially did a very good job, if you want to call it that, of not directly answering that charge. But also I think that news might be sinking in with him today, of realising he's not popular.
Yeah, I mean, he did a good job in the sense that, like, I've been watching a lot of Game of Thrones and Sopranos, and if you combine those, there's that element of, like, you can never concede that you're wrong, because if you do that, then, like, everyone else has the advantage. Yeah. And so it did feel like he didn't really concede much in terms of, like, yeah, I've done this wrong. Like, even when he was asked, like, are there things you would have done differently? There weren't specifics. He just sort of, like, kind of kept it vague to the extent that by the end, I think he was just asked, like, well, can you at least understand why people are frustrated with the situation? And his response was like, yeah, I can understand why they're frustrated. And that was it.
And then just cold, stony silence, right? I think there's probably a book, like maybe a Dale Carnegie book somewhere about like the power of silence.
Yeah, and that was it. Oh, so you go, I like that you go Carnegie. I would have gone Jack Donaghy, where he does his motivational tapes, and then he waits for somebody to speak, fires them.
Well, I think Jack Donaghy is kind of a parody of Dale Carnegie's methods, right?
No, he's a real person. He's great. Actually, Jack Donaghy in real life would be the worst. I take that back.
Yeah. Okay, so I also want to think about. I saw the beginnings of an adversarial relationship between the press and Sunil Gulati, and the press and US soccer, which is not a thing that has happened over the last few years. I've got this feeling that if Sunil Gulati stands and wins, you may see a more aggressive press corps in terms of going after US soccer and asking some tougher questions than they have in the past. And I'm basing that just on this sort of mood of anger that was coming, like it was simmering underneath all the questions today.
Yeah, and I'll say this. I think for people who feel a little bit like they can't do anything to enact change, that they don't really, like their voice isn't being heard, I would say that the more you engage on social media and, you know, talk to the journalists who are there asking those questions, the more that's going to inform their coverage a little bit. And I'll say, if not from those guys asking questions, from me personally, that when we hear people say, like, you know, but like, why is he doing this or why is he doing that? That's things that we'll discuss. And I think that again, I don't really want to get into names, but if you're going to go with like one of the leading soccer journalists in the country and all the questions you're being asked is like, why isn't Gulati going to resign, or this is planned for the future, you're aware that if you don't ask that question or if you don't get tough on those questions, then you're going to hear about it yourself.
That's true.
So I think that can kind of motivate people.
Grassroots
and I think that's
pressure
what we're seeing
kind of.
as well. Yeah, because I think we're seeing readers be frustrated, and then writers who I think some were already frustrated by the state of things. I think some are more frustrated than they were now than they were then. I think we would probably fall into that category.
Yeah, I think there's a question of access, right? I think a lot of journalists are more polite than they are in private. In public, they're more polite to US soccer, especially in the past, because, you know, you want to maintain, it makes sense, right? You want to maintain good relations. You want to make sure you're all good so that you can get interviews, so that you're invited to press conferences, so that people will take your call, so you can ask questions for articles you're writing. But it seems like because the national mood is so kind of like, grrr, and I didn't mean that comically, like that is the national mood about soccer right now, right?
That was really well done, though.
That journalists feel more empowered to go tougher with US soccer, because it's almost like there's a united front of grrr, so it's not as if they can shut off all access, because then it's kind of like US soccer becomes some sort of Soviet state type thing.
Well, yeah,
only USsoccer.com is publishing news.
Yes, it's US Soccer approved news.
Yeah, that would be the
batches.
What Prava? Is that what it's called?
Pravda. Yeah.
Pravda.
Yeah. Yeah. I took a course on Soviet history and like Soviet political maneuverings. They're ruthless, so I don't think we want to go down that road.
Yeah. Okay.
What we do want to go down the road of is, number one, Daryl Grove is an accomplished Foley artist. I didn't know that, but he can at least do a bear impression. So anybody who needs voice acting out there you go. There's your man. Second of all, I also enjoyed when we're talking about the press that it felt like sort of like press pools of old, like some of the clips I've seen of journalists asking Nixon questions. I'm not trying to say Sunil Gulati is Richard Nixon, but it was a lot of like following up on Paul's question, following up on Brian's question. It was a lot of like kind of not letting him off the hook and not asking. I didn't hear really any like, are you tired? How you doing? Like there weren't any of those like softball questions. It felt like everybody kind of knew that they needed to be tougher, and I think they were.
Okay, one thing I want to get into, though, because I don't want this to just be an attack on Sunil Gulati, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, we have our frustrations with what's happened. I'm of the opinion that he didn't need to resign today, because what's the point, right? When there's an election coming in February, it would have been enough to say, I'm going to see out my term, and then I'll hand it over to the next guy in February 2018. So that, just to be on the record, that's what I would have wanted. But in terms of Sunil Gulati suggesting that he's going to stand again, he kind of, because he was asked, why do you think you should stand again? I can't remember who asked him, but he made the case. And his case was, he thinks the totality of his tenure, US soccer has grown and progressed so much. And it was terrible to miss the World Cup, but now US soccer is like more commercially successful. It's a bigger organization. There's youth development stuff in place. So he's kind of like saying, look at the long term and see the progress we've made, and don't sort of blame me for don't make a decision, or I'm not going to make a decision just based on what happened in the recent hex.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm convinced by that, but I think it's worth getting his side of the argument out there.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's kind of what we expected. I think we always thought he was going to kind of hedge on the side of, hey, we haven't gotten that World Cup yet, but we've made, considerable strides in terms of our influence in FIFA, so I need to stick around to make sure we get that, because wouldn't that be the worst if we missed the 2018 World Cup and then didn't land the 2026? Yeah. And I can understand why he feels entitled another stint as U.S. Soccer president, because I think in his mind, he probably feels like, I've done all this. The team failed, these two managers failed, and now suddenly, there's more criticism than ever. And I can understand how that would be his thought process, but I more understand how people on the outside are thinking, well, you're the one who hired those two coaches, and that didn't work well. And now we're in a situation where it feels like things are stagnant, and that's not great. So, yeah, I mean, I can understand why he would feel slightly victimized, but I can also understand why maybe he should not feel that way.
There's also, you remember I talked to Noah Davies about the long profile he wrote for Howler magazine about Sunil Gulati. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the phrases Noah used to sum up Sunil Gulati is he's not accumulating money like some officials, mm-hmm. But he is accumulating power. Like what Sunil Gulati is interested in is power. So if that's his key driver is to have power, why would you give up the US soccer presidency, right? I should have researched this, but is his seat on the FIFA board a result of his US soccer presidency and his CONCACAF membership? Does all that go away if he uses the US soccer presidency?
I believe it does, because I believe in the responsibilities of the president of US soccer in that the bullet points guide to the board. I think the final bullet point was he will serve as the representative to CONCACAF, FIFA, and any other member organizations that exist.
All right, so we can maybe pretty much confirm that, right? I'm kind of confident that that's the case, and that might be a reason why he's determined to hold on to power. It's because he's just got to the top table. You know what I mean? He's only recently at the top table.
And then with that in mind, maybe
he's been promoted and now he's going to be relegated.
But I will say, with that in mind, though, I do kind of understand it then, that, there is that argument. It's kind of the same argument that we were having, or it's a similar argument that we were having the other night about, why you want to bring somebody in who has familiarity with youth teams, so that when Jonathan Gonzalez is waiting to hear is he going to get a call-up, but instead it's the same people called up by the new manager, that he might be like, all right, well, I'm never going to get looked at. So, because that dialogue is gone, you're starting afresh. And I could see that, if there's a new representative in there, people don't know who he is, or she is, people don't know what to make of this person. So, you know what? Let's look at that North Africa bid again, and maybe we combine a few people, and suddenly that's a pretty attractive bid. It's Mediterranean, you Europe down there easily. Okay. So I can see how he would think, no, I need to be there, and I can see how that would be a motivating factor in his kind of decision to at least not resign and likely run again.
Maybe is there some position that can be created so Sunil Gulati is in charge of the 2026 World Cup bid? So he can still have a role, but it isn't to be US soccer president. That seems like maybe a good compromise, because, all that frustrations with Sunil Gulati, he is sort of, it seems, the architect of the 2026 World Cup bid. So he does have the right to maybe see that through. Yeah.
Yes, I think he could probably be the head of the bid committee, although they may already have one. And honestly, he may be it. I don't know. I can't say off the top of my head. But I think I would say, though, that with the ball rolling the way it is, it seems like you've already got kind of the bid preparation in process, or it's already been submitted. So it does seem like it's kind of already on its way, but maybe he needs to be there to smooth it out a little bit and maybe shake some hands.
Yeah.
But I think we've talked about Gulati enough, so I know we're going to move on, or we have other stuff to get to. But I did want to say, I'm kind of playing devil's advocate there. I am still pretty frustrated that there wasn't more. If he's going to stay on, I did feel like there needed to be more. Yes, this should have been done differently, and I've learned my lesson. Or this should. It just didn't feel like there was enough there for me to feel like he has the ability to right this ship. And so at the end of the day, I still feel like I would rather see somebody else there than see Gulati with another term.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that as well. What worried me a little bit is, in his opening statement, because there's an opening statement before he took questions, he talked about sort of, obviously this has gone wrong and we're going to have to do a deep dive and look at a lot of things. And he listed a lot of things, but kind of vaguely, right? He listed player development. We're going to look at coaching. He said we're going to look at pay to play, but obviously no specifics. It was a lot of, we're going to look at things and we're going to see what we can do. And he didn't give any indication of doing anything in any direction. And also when he listed the things they were going to look at, he specifically did not mention the structure of the US soccer pyramid
No,
and basically promotion relegation. And I thought that was, I mean, I didn't expect him to say that, but for a second I was waiting for it. So maybe I did expect it. But it was conspicuous by its absence, put it that way.
Oh yeah, definitely. I want to take that approach to like all of my life. Like I want to be a firefighter, and when I go to the fire, they're like, "Are you going to put the fire out?" I'm definitely going to look at the fire, and I'm going to like evaluate all my options, and we'll definitely figure out a plan for moving forward. Like, but the house is on fire. Oh, I understand, but we're going to look at our options and see where we are. I like that approach to things.
But it seemed like a lot of vague language in terms of, there are short-term processes and long-term processes, and we're going to look at this, and we're going to investigate that. Like it's sort of like he couldn't pinpoint a specific thing that was going to be enacted, or that was like the top of the agenda, what was prioritized.
No.
I'd also say I kind of wish that there were just things in place happening now. In like, okay, so we talked in the past, you and I, about sort of development academies and how that's producing talent, and we're excited about it through Major League Soccer. But then a lot of the academies, or almost all the academies outside of Major League Soccer, you have to pay to play. Like, it seems like if they knew that was a problem, maybe something should have been worked on even when results were going okay. Do you know what I mean? Like, either it's a problem or it's not. So it can't just be suddenly a problem because we lost 2-1 to Trinidad. Like, if Clint Dempsey's shot hadn't hit the post and it had gone in, or if, I don't know if it was Benny Feilhaber or Bobby Wood in the end, had that header that was saved, or if Panama's goal was not ruled to have crossed the line, does that just mean that we would not have looked at any of the pay-to-play issues? You know what I'm saying? Like, these are things that should have been worked on anyway, but it seems like part of the thing is we've got complacent because we were qualifying for World Cups.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's 100% the way it would have gone, because you can easily then be like, well, it didn't go smoothly, but we qualified, and we can, kind of look at some new talent and bring in some new blood and really reinvigorate the program. And that might have worked, honestly. Like, they might have been able to get out of the group of the World Cup, and you bring in a couple new guys, and suddenly everything's okay.
Well, I was talking more systemic, structural stuff. Like, it shouldn't be looked at now. It should have been looked at like for the last 10 years. I'm agreeing. Then I was in a roundabout way of saying basically, but I feel like all that issue is still there. It just continues to be papered over. Does that make sense? It does. Yeah, I agree with that.
All right.
Do you want to talk about sort of the coaching stuff? Because Bruce Arena, the announcement that he was resigning, weirdly was leaked this morning as opposed to being announced on the teleconference. Yeah. I don't know if that was to soften the blow in a weird way, like to let the news trickle out instead of be one big hammer blow. But obviously we knew it was coming, right? What I was kind of expecting was an announcement about who the next coach will be, and we didn't get that.
Yep, we did not. And which, again, I don't quite get, because you're not going to get any big-name coaches in. If you have, like, friendlies, not qualifiers, coming up in November, like, someone's got to be there. So it would have made sense to me to name an interim manager, and my only thought is that maybe the person who they're considering for interim manager does not want the interim tag. And
that's interesting.
It's sort of like, like that's all I can figure. And I think maybe Matt Doyle suggested that earlier before the conference call, that that Tab Ramos was the most likely candidate, but he might not want to be the interim manager. And I do wonder if maybe they were like, all right, well, we'll have him as an interim manager. Arena will be out. We'll announce that stuff. People will be satisfied that changes are happening. And then maybe things didn't go quite the way they wanted to, but for whatever reason, there was no new coach named, and I was very surprised by that.
So they did say, I think a Sunil Gulati quote is, there's going to be a short-term process, which is a thing he said quite a lot, for November, meaning an interim appointment for the November friendlies, which they confirmed are happening. More on that in a minute. And then maybe sort of a look for a long-term solution after February. So it could be that Tab Ramos is saying, hey, if you're going to give it to me full time. Or maybe it's just a salary negotiation. Or maybe it's a negotiation about like how much, what his role in terms of youth technical director is, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
I mean, that's all a possibility. Maybe he wants to hold on to the technical director spot, or get like the technical director as opposed to youth. I know that was a question that came up. Like,
that was
there could be any number of reasons.
Didn't Sunil Gulati essentially? Someone was asking, will there be a full-time technical director announced, like in the role that essentially Klinsmann theoretically had until he was fired, and then has been left vacant? And the answer was basically that Tab Ramos, as youth technical director, is doing that job anyway. So I think we should stop making this distinction. I really think Tab Ramos is the technical director.
I know, it cracked me up. It cracked me up that he like completely confirmed what you had said, because he really did say like, Tab Ramos has been the youth director, and I mean, really everything we do with technical directing happens at like the U20 or lower level. So,
I'll say this, that
like that.
We were talking the other day about how I was kind of frustrated with US soccer and how it had become like a weird commercial operation, like a company or something. And I was having trouble putting into words what I didn't like about that. And I think what I don't like about that is exactly this, where like people's job titles are weird and you have to like work out what it actually means. Like there's sort of a base level lack of transparency with having Klinsmann be technical director but not really doing anything. Tab Ramos be youth technical director but actually being technical director. Like that all just seems like it's like when people are given weird titles that don't actually match their job.
Everyone's a vice president, Daryl.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone's a vice president.
Yeah, like vice president of sales, but you're really quite junior. You know what I mean? There's a little bit of that going on.
And then everybody gets really combative about business cards, and then maybe that leads to terrible things down the road while listening to Huey Lewis in the news.
Well, mine are this thick and yours are that thick. Oh, is that an American Psycho reference?
It was.
I didn't think we would go there today. So how about
why not?
How about the friendlies? So what we knew there were November friendlies coming. I think the news that came out today that I hadn't thought about is that it seems like it's going to be either 1 or 2 games, and they're going to be almost certainly one of them will be in Europe, probably the other one will be in Europe, is what was said. And that makes perfect sense to me because the US has played on home soil so much recently. If we had qualified for the World Cup, we would have probably wanted to go and do a European friendly anyway. Now that we have, if it's against a European team, you're not going to ask them to do a transatlantic flight, right? They're not going to want to do that. They've qualified for the World Cup, I mean, or haven't. But we're so we're going to be going over and visiting them to play 2 friendlies in November. And what I did is I looked at the MLS soccer schedule. It's on break for the playoffs. So, there's the MLS playoffs start, but then there's a break while the international window happens. I am convinced now that all the people who sort of want like this generation of players just done away with and start fresh, might weirdly kind of get what they want, at least in November, because I'm guessing it won't be in the interests of, let's take Michael Bradley and Josie Altidore, Toronto gearing up for the playoffs. It's better for their playoff run if they don't go on a transatlantic flight and play 2 games in that window.
Yeah, 2 meaningless friendlies, you mean?
Well, I mean, so here's the thing. If it's Tab Ramos in charge, I would argue it's not meaningless because it might be the first time we see, say, Weston McKennie line up for the US national team alongside Christian Pulisic and DeAndre Yedlin, and suddenly you might get a glimpse of the future of the US national team.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I think where I come from the meaningless point is like these were obviously friendlies. I think he confirmed they were friendlies that they've been working on. Like with kind of the idea that they were going to be at the World Cup, so you got to get some kind of like some different competition in there in Europe, so you get used to things a little bit more. And so now that we haven't qualified, I think it's probably a situation where they would probably rather not play those games because they'd rather take their time and like find the manager they want. But now they've got the contracts and they can't really back out. So I guess we're going to play, and I guess we got to find somebody. And that's where I feel like their hand is going to be forced a little bit because they have to have a manager there. And if they want anyone to take any interest in these games, it can't be sort of like an interim manager who we've never heard of, who we know. Like, it can't be Richie Williams or Paul Arena or anything like that. Like,
you mean Kenny Arena?
2 games, but Kenny Arena, yeah. Paul. I don't know where I came from with Paul, but whatever. Kenny, Paul, whatever. I'm sure there's a Paul Arena out there somewhere, but it can't be somebody who's just like there, like literally there as a caretaker for 2 games, and then we'll see what happens after that. So it kind of forces things or maybe expedites the process more than they would have liked, but I'm okay with that because I would like the United States not to be playing completely meaningless games.
What if it was like Eric Winalda or someone just coaches the team on an interim basis? Because we're pretty convinced it's going to be Tab Ramos, right? Because he's on staff and because he knows the youth players, and I'm pretty much on board with it. I don't think it's a bad idea, even if it feels less exciting and a bit flat. I think it's probably a sensible, good idea. But I want to do some like weird like dream casting for the interim manager, which is an odd sort of limited ambition type thing. But why not call in someone who like doesn't have that much top level coaching experience? Someone like Eric Winalda, who everyone's interested to see what a US team he coaches would look like.
I mean, that's one shot for sure. I would say like, just based on how much we've enjoyed him as an analyst, how smart he seems to be when it comes to soccer. I mean, if you're throwing out a crazy name, I'd throw out Stu Holden. Why not?
Ooh, yes, that'd be interesting.
I mean, he's
definitely someone who can relate, right?
Again, yeah, there's that. And then this is a very low bar, don't get me wrong, but like how many times have you and I been watching a game the second time around and we're like, oh, like they're clearly doing this, and then we listen to Stu Holden say it like at the same time or 5 seconds previously upon first viewing. So like he's able to figure that stuff out and kind of pick it up. I don't know. Maybe Stu Holden is interim manager for 2 games.
Oh,
Let's start that movement, shall we?
I don't want to take us down this road. I know you're running out of time as well because you got to set up for coaching soon. You got cones to put out.
Yep.
But I would have really enjoyed watching the US at a World Cup on Fox if it's like we got Stu Holden in the broadcast booth. Because we haven't really, just having him like point out some tactical stuff would have been really fascinating. I think it would have been a good experience and a good way to grow the game. I guess let's not go down the route of what could have been. Eh?
No, let's not.
I'm sorry for even half opening that door.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
The other thing that came out of this was, I think someone asked someone kind of asked, like, are you even going to play next year? And Sunil Gulati says, yeah, there's a full calendar, there's a full FIFA calendar, and we'll play the full calendar of games. I mean, I know that it's heartbreaking, but if you're going to move the program forward, you've got to play some games, right? So I think it's still an exciting year in terms of getting some fresh new players in there. So let's play the full calendar of games, is what I'm saying.
Well, the only thing that I didn't love is I think he said, like, and obviously there's going to be FIFA windows where we're going to be calling up players. And I was like, I mean, there's a big one between June and July, but like it felt a little bit like you're not trying to have friendlies during the World Cup, are you? Because that seems ill-advised.
No, I mean there are FIFA calendar dates, right? Like there'll be one in March and the usual. I think May and June. Yeah. So we'll be playing some friendlies.
Yeah, there'll be friendlies. It'll be. I'm not gonna lie. It is going to be difficult to really get up for those games because there's always going to be the reminder of like what they should be in preparation for. But that said, I do think, and I said this to Daryl before we started recording, but he did. I was pretty down yesterday. View behind the curtain of like, I don't really want to talk about the U.S. anymore. This is too much of a bummer. And I think he was the one who was like, no, we got to be like, let's talk about like the future. Let's be optimistic a little bit. And it did help. And I do feel better.
Yeah.
So I do think that's the way to look at those games is sort of, yes, it's going to be a bummer because of what they represent. But by the same token, it's an opportunity to kind of be there on the ground floor when the United States rises from the ashes and new faces come in and things are exciting. That's the way I'm choosing to see it. Support
the new players, right? Have you got time to talk about another topic, or have you got to go?
I got a couple minutes.
Okay, so
Coach Pav has just pulled up and is staring at me. So that's interesting.
Tell Coach Pav hello from me when you see him in a minute. We've been getting a few emails and tweets about how like no one aged 27 or over, or no one aged 25 or over was an email I got, should be selected for this team. Let's just absolutely wipe the slate clean. And I just want to like go on the record. Like we've been talking about the future a lot, and I believe in like picking some younger players. But I don't think it's worth picking younger players without any of the older players, right? Like Josie Altidore should absolutely be a part of the US men's national team going forward. Like he's not guaranteed a spot, but we can't close the door on a 27-year-old striker who's maybe the best he's ever been. Like this is the best Josie Altidore has ever been right now. So why close the door on him right now just out of spite? There's no reason to do that.
I mean, recent performances aside, I'd say right now. No, I mean, there's not, and like it's.
But like Friday night, he was brilliant. Tuesday, he was not great. Friday, he was brilliant. So, like if we can get Friday Josie, call him up.
Yeah, but I mean, I would say the same thing about like Jeff Cameron. We didn't see him play, and he's definitely older. But I wouldn't mind having a veteran in there to help kind of like shepherd people, show how center back should actually be played, and then we transition as we transition. But I don't think we need to do the sweeping. No 27-year-olds need apply because if nothing else, that's ageism, man.
It is,
you can't do that. You're going to get slapped with a lawsuit.
Yeah, and both of us are over 27, right? So we want our shot.
Yeah. I mean, Daryl Grove has yet to be capped, although I'm not sure you're eligible yet. But I am. So call me up, USA. I'm ready to go.
I've got my eye on an England World Cup call up.
Yeah, I think hold your breath, buddy. Definitely hold your breath on that one.
Definitely hold my breath.
Yeah. And that seems a good place to end because I do have to hop out now. Now other coaches are making grids and things like that, so I should probably go join them.
All right, Taylor, well, very literally, thank you for taking all the time you had to talk to me today. The domestic football is back this weekend, right? We're going to talk more US soccer in the future, but I think we'll do this weekend, we'll watch the Premier League, right? It's Liverpool, Man United. There's a lot of stuff coming
I've heard of that game.
So we'll take our eye off the US at least for a couple days. Remind ourselves there's other soccer in the world, but we'll return to US soccer things also later next week, maybe. Sound good?
That works for me.
All right. Have a good coaching session. Coach those kids.
All right, brother. All right. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Thanks, bud.